The following thoughts on Hoppe Hour do not represent Cox Media Group or its sponsoring. Anything you hear may and will be used against you. Thank you.
What's up? This is Hoppe Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe, and on the phone line from the Jason Ellis Show on Faction Talk on SiriusXM Radio, Michael Tully is on Hoppe Hour. What's up, dude?
Hey, man. Happy to be here. I love the name. I'm a sucker for a pun.
Thank you, sir. I was talking to my friend Chad Zumock about you, who you're friends with, who is doing comedy out there in Los Angeles. And what I said to him is, you're one of the most underrated names in radio right now, dude. What you bring to the Jason Ellis Show is very underrated in radio.
Yeah, I agree. It's a travesty. I'm amazing at this.
How long have you been doing radio, dude? It seems like you've been at it for a while.
Well, you know what? You kind of wake up one day, and I guess that's kind of true. You know, I was writing for a show, but not on air, for a couple of years, and then in 2005, I moved to LA. And even before I got involved with Jason, I was doing some music DJing and stuff. So, you know, I guess I've been doing it for 12 years now. And
how have you grown as a guy doing radio? Like, do you ever listen to your old work and cringe?
Not as bad as you would think. For one thing, I was a singer before I was on the radio, so I got really used to hearing my own voice, which is, I think, a hard thing for some people to get past, like the way your voice really sounds. I kind of knew what my voice sounded like, you know? And, no, I'm actually, of course, with a lot of glaring exceptions, I feel like for a while there, I felt like I had to, there was a certain kind of personality that I wanted to put across. So I would it wasn't so much that I wasn't being who I really was. I was just sort of picking and choosing which elements of myself I showed. And just, frankly, the fact that we do what we used to do for years, 20 hours of radio a week with Jason, like, sooner or later, I always tell my wife that. I'll be like, oh, we were talking about blah, blah, blah. And she's like, why the fuck would you even talk about that on a radio show? And I'm like, well, when you talk to somebody for 100 hours a month, sooner or later, you're going to talk about every subject conceivable. So sooner or later, everything about me came out, and every side of my personality and my interest and stuff came out. So I only regret listening to old stuff in the regard that, you know, it wasn't the full me.
Now, since you spend so much time with Jason, do you guys ever get into any fights off the air, since you guys are with each other for 100 hours and more each month?
No. You know, I remember reading, I think it was a guy from Soul Asylum saying about his band that by the time they got successful, they'd already made a bunch of albums. And he's like, nobody fights anymore because we had all the fights and we know how they end and we know where everybody stands on everything. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we've come to agree on everything, but we just, you know, you can only fight the same fight so many times. You can only have the same philosophical disagreement so many times before you just go, let's just figure out a way to work around that. So no, we're actually very peaceful.
So now, you guys have been doing the show for the past 12 years. When do you think was when you guys began to really click? When was it that you guys became a really good show?
I feel like just about when it went to afternoons, you know, Jason was amazing by himself before I came along and was, you know, on Tony Hawk's show, and he was, which, you know, he started off on SiriusXM, and then he was amazing just yelling into a microphone by himself at night. You know, definitely my at the beginning was to try to give the show a little bit more form and a little bit more of a layout and a little bit more of a plan to try to spitball some segments and stuff like that. So it became an actual show when we went in the afternoon. And then when Josh Richmond, our intern turned co-host, came along, that obviously, you know, ignited a thing and took it to another level.
So what have been some of the craziest memories over the past 12 years? Because I hate the word shock jock, but at times that's what the show would be called. So what have been some of the crazy memories, some of the craziest bits you guys have done? If it was on Faction or now on Faction Talk?
You know, it's really kind of all blurred into one big mess in my head. I mean, my stock answer for this is always the time that we were doing the show. This is when we were still on at night, and we were started talking about the transsexual prostitutes around the corner at the taco stand, and we were like, well, I bet they're like this, and I bet it's like that. And finally I was like, I bet they'd come over here and talk to us. So it seemed like a good idea when I walked over there with $20 to hire somebody to come back and talk to some ladies.
And what happened when you walked over? Did you guys get yelled at by management at all or anything like that?
No, you know what's really funny about that is that we are barely supervised in Los Angeles, which I think it shows, for better and for worse. But we had a guy who's no longer with the company, but who was a Sirius corporate boss, who just happened to be in town. And I guess I don't know if he wanted to seem cool or if he just wanted to have plausible deniability, but I remember I walked past him and he was sitting at a desk typing something, and I said, I got $20. I'm going to go hire a transsexual prostitute to come on the show. And he didn't even stop typing, and he didn't turn his head to look at me. He just said, okay. That's, it's really funny when you mention that. It used to be, boring to have topless women in the studio unless it was a particularly exceptional top, It became so commonplace, and I guess it just things just a little bit at a time, and you wake up one day and all of a sudden you're in a very different place than you once were. I can't remember the last time somebody took their shirt off in the studio, but that used to be like once a week. It was crazy.
So now, do you think every time Jason goes on Howard's show, it gives you guys even more of a fan base? Or it seems like every time Jason goes on Howard's show, you guys get bigger and bigger,
I don't really know about that because I feel like, Howard Stern doesn't have many casual listeners, and he doesn't do that many shows. So if you miss a show the first time, if you listen to the Howard Stern channel, eventually you're going to hear all of the shows. So I don't know. I think anybody who I can't imagine the person who wasn't to him the first 5 times, who the 6th time goes, okay, now I get it. This is for me, But I don't think there's any, I could be wrong, I don't know. But I don't think there's any denying that it was a huge, huge bump initially.
Now, there's a lot of different talk shows at SiriusXM, if it's in Los Angeles or at New York City, where I actually got to visit when I sat in on Eric Nagel's show. So what I'm saying is, do you feel like there's a lot of competition and a lot of egos that butt heads, or at the end of the day, do people pretty much get along for the most part?
I think the New York facility and the LA facility are very different places, and New York is a lot more people, so a lot more opportunity to, I guess, rub people the wrong way and stay 5 minutes too long in the studio. Some other shows, or whatever. For the longest time, it was us and Jude, and we never had, Jude Angelini had Street 45. And he had his own studio, and we had our studio, and we were totally cool on a personal level as well. And even now, there's only really like 5 or 6 shows, so everybody's friendly, but I don't really have with any of the other shows. And I don't think there's relationships with any of the other shows. Everybody's got a spot.
What was the original beef with the show Covino and Rich, and how did you guys solve it? Because when you guys had them on and you guys made up maybe a year or 2 ago, that was some pretty good radio.
I don't know. I don't even remember how it started. I think it was just people being competitive. I think you could probably point at a couple of little incidents, but I don't think there was actually any real any real source to people not getting along. No, but I'm friendlier with them now than I've ever been, particularly because we're in LA. I mean, they were in New York, and then they were on different time, slots than us. So I just run into them in the bathroom every morning. So we're totally friendly.
What's the biggest thing now that you guys are doing it in the morning? Because for years you guys were on in the afternoon. What's been the biggest transition for you guys now doing the show each morning on Faction Talk?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I think everybody kind of knows this, but it becomes really, really clear when you do it. You're a slightly different person at different times of the day, you know? I'm not, and I don't know if it's necessarily for the best, I'm not, like many people, I'm not particularly silly when I first wake up in the morning. If you catch me at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you know, that's probably a better time, and that's when we used to be on from 12 to 4 local time. So I definitely feel like the tone changes a little bit because of that simple fact. And then this doesn't affect anybody but me, but like the way that I prep for a show. I used to put 2, maybe 3 hours into a 4-hour show, and it's just, I'm not going to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to do that. So I do what I can after a show for the next day, and then I just kind of wake up. But I actually, almost every show, I feel like I am cramming for a test. Like I'm cramming, you know, like I'm like, I got to check this and check this and check this, and then I got to keep all those things in my mind, and then as soon as the show's over, I've pretty much forgotten all of it.
Now, for anybody that's listening that does a podcast, that does a show on XM radio or on FM radio, how should we or anybody else look for prep on a slow news day? How do you guys find prep, things to talk about when there's not much going on in the world?
Yeah, it never really comes to that. You know, there's definitely days that we don't end up using the prep, so it's not as if we need to restock it every day. But today, actually, I got to the bottom of my news file, because if I don't use something someday, I'll use it a week later. I don't care, and I'll try to remember to say, because I know there's going to be people who are like, well, I read that a week ago, you guys suck, or Opie and Anthony, Opie talked about that a week ago. I don't know. I don't really worry about that stuff, because I feel like Jason and me are going to have a different take on a news story than anybody else, so I don't care if we don't get to it first. But I sit on stuff, and today I actually got to the bottom of my news file. As of right now, I don't have a single news thing to talk about for tomorrow, but there'll be something, especially because we don't feel we've only recently started doing like headlines and water cooler kinds of subjects, and even at that we don't spend a whole lot of time with them. I'm way more apt to just find, like one of my favorite stories that we did today was about a house for sale in, I think, South Carolina, where there's an upstairs unit, and you're not allowed to meet the person who lives there, and you're not allowed to see it, and you're not supposed to ask any questions, and the person doesn't pay any rent and just deal with it. But the house is for and who wants to buy it, and speculating on the nature of who or what is living in the attic, to me is way more fun. And they're tense. In 10 years, it's been a rare day that there hasn't been a couple of those for us to chew on.
What have been some of the good interviews you guys have done, and what have been some of the weird interviews that just went down a weird path real fast?
I always get a thrill when there's somebody that I'm personally a fan of, that I respect, that you feel like you're like gelling with personally. I don't know if these necessarily always translate into the best listening experience, but I've gotten to geek out a little bit on guitar stuff with Slash, and I'll totally admit I wore a shirt that was of a pick company, a guitar pick company, just thinking maybe if anybody's going to notice this, it'll be Slash. And when I did the interview, he's like, "Are you wearing a Dunlop pick?" And I fucking love those picks. And I'm like, "Me too, Slash." And he's like, "But only the purple ones." And I'm like, "That's exactly right, Slash. Only the purple fucking Dunlop guitar picks." That's crazy. Him and I have the exact same taste in picks, and we just had a moment over it. So that's fun for me. Or like even a guy like Rob Corddry, I will watch absolutely anything that Rob Corddry's in. So if he's on the show and him, it makes me feel like I'm really doing something right. The bad ones are all pretty notorious. Andrew Dice Clay didn't go well, and Lenny Dykstra didn't go well, and we had a really awkward, long interview with the comedian Eliza Schlesinger years ago. And I remember one time we had on a bunch of Penthouse pets. The girl who I think was the pet of the year was either had just gotten drunk or was drunk from the night before and was kind of nodding off on air, even though we were on in the middle of the afternoon. And that was a little unsettling.
What I like about you guys, though, is a lot of times these shows, when they have girls on that are in porn, they ask them the same cliche things. What's it like when you do this act? What's it like doing this? But whenever you guys have girls on or girls in porn, you actually talk to them like human beings. And I find that very refreshing, is when you guys have girls that are in porn on. You guys actually have deep talks with them, you know?
Well, you know, if I can gross brag a little bit here, I honestly feel like a lot of guys who get into radio, particularly your classic shock jock type, is a guy who maybe had trouble talking to girls in high school or whatever, and this is their weird sort of revenge that now they're behind a microphone and they have this persona and they have some sunglasses, but they fundamentally... I mean, and we all know all the guys I'm talking about, but they fundamentally, they are still kind of like, ooh, do you put stuff in your pussy? Oh my God, you know, like and I feel like, you know, Jason's sexual exploits are legendary, and, you know, I'm married now, but, you know, I was I said he should be a singer in a band. Like I've talked to women before, and I honestly feel like that's a big difference with us. Is a lot of the guys who we would be competing with sound to me like they don't have a whole lot of experience with talking to women off the air.
Dude, it's weird, man. These shock jocks that are in there like little markets, it's never like the big names. It's the ones that are like household names in their one or two markets are the ones that are so creepy. It's so weird, Mike. I don't know how they let it get to their head, because once they leave that market, no one knows who they are. But with their wacky names, they're known within that market. I find it to be a very sad thing to let the fame of being in a small town get to your head, you know?
I don't know, man. You know, if you are truly happy in that bubble and you are truly deluded, then I don't really see what the harm is. If you kind of secretly know that you're living a sham, that you're not the big shot that you portray yourself as, well, then that's going to be kind of empty and shallow. But I don't know. I could imagine. You know, if you saved up your money and then at the end of your life you retired and moved to some incredibly poor country and bought a mansion, you'd be the fucking big shot in town. And maybe you would be able to convince yourself that you were a big deal because you were relative to all the people that you saw on a daily basis.
Now, what I want to ask you is, you guys seem to be growing by the minute. Do you think there's going to be any point that you guys will be the face of SiriusXM? No, I doubt it. I think Sirius has made it really clear that the only way that would happen is if Jason somehow became a mainstream celebrity outside of radio. You know, it's been their MO from the beginning, and it's clearly still their MO to put together a little pamphlet of what you get if you keep your subscription when you buy your new car, and it has pictures of a bunch of people you've seen on TV. You know, and I think that's the way that they market themselves. You know, a perfect example is they just went and got Craig Ferguson, and I say because Craig Ferguson is actually, and he was amazing on TV, and he's naturally amazing on the radio. But there have definitely been some other people who look good in a brochure who were not very good at speaking extemporaneously for a couple hours a day. So it's hard to imagine the company ever getting behind in that regard. And I think there's always going to be the stigma, too, that Jason's not nearly as crazy as he used to be, but at the end of the day, nobody totally 100% believes that he's not going to do something to embarrass them if they put him front and center. I find that so lame when they say these hosts like, let's say Jason or Howard or Opie, they'll say, oh, they're not as edgy as they used to be. To me, it's more like they're like fine wine. They get better with age. It's almost creepy if you have like a quote unquote shock jock that's doing weird things while they're in their 40s or 50s. To me, I like when a host gets more mature over age, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is true, but I even mean it in the regard of, I think Jason was more apt a few years ago to go, fuck it, I've got a problem with this or that, we're not doing a show today.
Okay.
You know, where I just mean that kind of stuff of just not, I think that most publicly traded corporations like to put their eggs in the baskets of people who are really dependable, good soldiers, bordering on suck-ups, people who play the game.
Dude, it seems like the comedy scene out there is growing by the minute. You have Sam Tripoli, you have Chad Zumock, you have you and Jason doing some shows. I mean, it just seems like it's becoming a big hub for new up-and-coming comedy out there in Los Angeles, you know?
Well, I mean, not so much for up-and-coming. It's a really tough place to be an up-and-comer because most people who are here work their shit out somewhere else.
Okay.
And they're way more stage ready, and because, rents are really, really high, and nobody's going to keep putting you on stage if you don't draw people. So it becomes this catch-22 of if you're really, really famous and, if Ryan Gosling wants to start doing stand-up tomorrow, Ryan Gosling's got a stand-up career because Ryan Gosling could pack the Improv once a week. But if you aren't going to draw like that, then you need to kill. And if you've never done stand-up before, you're probably not going to kill, So it's really tough like that. And I'm really happy that I've gotten into stand-up. I take it really seriously, but it's fundamentally still kind of a lark. It's not something I was strongly planning to do until Bert Kreischer was cool enough to pull me into it. And then once I got into it, I was like, this is cool. These are, when I was a kid, I used to watch TV shows with, live from these clubs in Hollywood and have an opportunity to perform there. Sure, it's like nerve-wracking, but, I want to do that. But I don't feel like the door has just opened for me. I feel like everybody in LA is doing stand-up, and something just clicked with people where they're like, if I can talk, I can tell jokes. And so I feel like it's bad enough that I'm kind of a Johnny-come-lately, but it's even worse that I feel like there's lots of Johnny-come-latelys, and I hate to be one of them, and I feel like I am.
Dude, going back to Bert Kreischer, I got to hang out with him for a week on the Mike Kelta cruise. And, dude, Bert's one of the most humble guys you will ever meet, man. He was so cool. It's awesome how it seems like he cares about everyone that he tries to help in comedy, Yeah,
I mean, I like, Bert a lot professionally, but just personally, I love him. He and I get along, and I think a lot of people have that experience with him. The last time I was around him outside of the radio show, he did a show that I was on at the Comedy Store, and I saw him in the little, artist bar afterwards, and I just sat down, and we just got steep and heavy for like an hour or two. And I hadn't talked to him for months before that, and I don't really know him all that well, but I think that's one of the reasons people connect with him, is he really is the prototypical life of the party, and usually the life of the party has like a lot of heart.
So what I want to ask you too is, how has everything been going with your podcast? It seems like it's growing since the show is growing as well on Faction Talk now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have been really, really happy with, I guess I'm about 3 months into doing it. I've done 10 or so. And, there's definitely the part of you that wonders if you can hold down the show by yourself. And I think that was a legitimate concern the first couple ones, but I definitely feel like I've got a handle on that part, and that feels good after 10 years of being a sidekick to know that, you are capable of doing that. And then on the Jason Ellis Show, we have not always been 100% happy with the guests that, or lack thereof, that we get from the talent relations department. But I've been really, really blown away at the guests that they've been able to to get me. I mean, I've already scratched some people who are really high on my wish list off. I've only been doing the show a couple of months, and then I felt pretty good that I've been able to gel and get along pretty well with some of the guests that I've gotten. So I definitely still think it's more like an hour of me and somebody talking than it is like an actual proper show, and that's kind of the next frontier for me. But I really couldn't be happier with the product.
Now, where can people find your work online, and where can they find your show online as well, and how can they hear the Jason Ellis Show each day?
Right, so if you go to, I can tell you in broad strokes, if you go to the SiriusXM website, which I'm going to go ahead and guess is SiriusXM.com, and you can sign up for a free trial there. And I can honestly say I didn't pay for Sirius for years because I had it for free because I worked there, and I took it for granted because I had it for free and I never used it. And then my wife got a car and she had it in there, and when the trial subscription was up, we renewed it, and now I'm an actual SiriusXM fan. So if you spend more than a half hour a day in the car and you can spare $10 a month, I don't know why you wouldn't be on with this thing. But anyway, people go there, SiriusXM.com, get a free trial. You can listen to the Jason Ellis Show on demand or live on the channel's called Faction Talk. Jason and I also have a podcast, which if people are listening to this, they're obviously familiar with how to get podcasts. That one is called Ellistronics. And my show is the Tully Show. The last episode had Kyle Kinane. It was a good one.
Well, dude, keep up the good work, man. I'm glad we were able to get this show down after doing message tag back and forth with our busy schedules. So it was a lot of fun having you on Hoppe Hour, man.
Thanks, man. How's your car?
Oh, dude, everything's fine, man. I just needed to get I needed to get more oil in there. Basically, what happened is, for the listeners out there, it's Wednesday, and you're supposed to be on Tuesday, rather. And what happened was I didn't have enough oil in the car because for a second job, I do Uber on the side, and I should have done it sooner. So when I was at the radio job doing some office work, my car broke down, so I had to have my friend jump it, and then I took it to AutoZone to get looked at to make sure everything was fine. And we could have done the show last night, but it felt so rushed that I was like, let's just wait one day, because I actually came home in time, but I was like, this is just too hectic. I just want to wait a day, Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that worked out for you, and I'm glad this worked out as well.
Keep up the good work, dude. I listen every day, and I hope people that listen to Hoppe Hour will now listen to the show as well.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
And that was Michael Tully from the Jason Ellis Show on Faction Talks on SiriusXM Radio. He called in to Hoppe Hour. Now, if you're a fan of his work and of the Jason Ellis Show and you want to hear more of my show, it's not hard. It's not rocket science. All you have to do is get my app in the Google Play or iOS shop. All you got to do is search up HOPPE Hoppe Radio. It's a mix of me interviewing comedians, talk show hosts, and much, much more. And I do shows on the side where I rant about news, and I'm trying to grow it into this brand. So it's Hoppe Radio, HOPPE Radio. And all my names on social media is at Ryan Hoppe Radio, but Snapchat, which is Hoppe Radio, because they won't let me change it back. All right. This has been Hoppe Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe, saying peace out.
Hoppe Hour. Hoppe Hour.